Welcome to the Outsider Philosopher. So today I'm going to do a reaction video to Sabine Hossenfelder. She has a short video out in the last couple of days about a new supposed leap in AI. And it's a short video, but she just says a number of things, one after the other, that sort of dovetail nicely into what I've been trying to push back against in this channel. But before I do that, I just want to let people know that I'm going to be changing the channel name and sort of the style of the content here in the next video. Um, I'm going to be calling this channel The Color of My Voice, and going to be segueing more into telling my personal story and commenting more on politics and culture. So if anybody's watching, if anybody out there is just waiting breathlessly for the next Outsider Philosopher podcast, um, that is going to be the change. I've enjoyed putting out these last 20 videos. Been doing really my best to respond to comments, and have had some nice exchanges with a few people. Really feel like they've given me some really cool ideas, and hopefully, in return, I've given them something to think about as well. So, with no further ado, this will be sort of my last video on sort of the philosophical end, but I thought reacting to Sabine's piece would be a good way to sort of tie everything together. Hey, quick editor's note. Some astute viewers will notice that in several of my tabs, there's the word pussy. And they may think, couldn't this guy have just opened up a different window? I want to explain what that is, and it leads into what the channel is going to be doing in the next couple of episodes. So, okay, so I should have opened a new window here, but it is pussy, as in Pussy Riot, the Russian punk band. Two members did 2 years in a Russian prison for their protest back in, I believe it was 2010, 2011. I'm going to be moving into that territory, talking about the war in Ukraine, American politics, and the importance of art and signification in these things. So when you see pussy up there at the top, that's what that's all about. I've been doing some research for the next episode and didn't want to lose all that. Okay, so this is Sabine Hossenfelder. Um, she's reacting to Claude 3 and a supposed breakthrough in artificial intelligence. But as I was listening to this short video of hers, she was just sort of repeating certain talking points that I think deserve real pushback. Just certain assumptions about the mind, about consciousness, and about free will. Maybe I'll just say from the outset that one of the things I find really interesting about this is that Sabine has a couple of videos where she calls herself a free will denier, and she talks about super determinism. And if anybody out there is thinking that there's this more nuanced view of determinism, there's really not, according to Sabine, at least. She says, super determinism, and then she's like, and why call it super determinism when it's really just determinism, meaning that literally everything's determined. It's one of the things I've been arguing on this channel. If you believe in determinism, you believe in a fixed future as much as you believe in a fixed past. And then, I argue that people like Sabine Hossenfelder and Sam Harris and Robert Sapolsky then go ahead and violate their own beliefs because they argue for possible futures. She takes climate change very seriously. I have nothing, wrong with that. But if you believe in determinism, if you believe in super determinism, the way that Sabine Hossenfelder does, it makes no sense to argue for any future because it's only going to be what's already in the cards, what's already inherent in the momentum of the present moment is all the future is going to be. But the reason I bring that up is because, okay, so Sabine Hossenfelder uh, will tell you that determinism is the truth, that super determinism is the truth. She will also tell you that she believes that conscious AI is right around the corner and that we should take that seriously. And what does conscious AI mean? This is what I find so fascinating. We're not worried about AI gaining consciousness. That's not what we're really worried about. What we're really worried about is AI gaining free will. And so Sam Harris makes this same point. He'll argue for very strict determinism, and then he'll go on and argue about, at least make the point that we should be concerned about AI gaining sentience, gaining consciousness. And again, we don't really care if AI is conscious. What we would really care about is AI becoming conscious and therefore having free will. So the same voices that are arguing that there is no free will are worried that AI will become conscious and therefore have free will, even if they're not capable of bringing themselves to admit it.
I'm convinced that it won't be long until a computer program will reach human-level intelligence and also become conscious. But I don't think we're quite there yet. Let's have a look at what happened this week that got everyone's circuits overheated. The reason I think it's basically certain that computer programs will become conscious is that there's nothing special going on in neurons that can't be reproduced on a computer. It's just that the brain has a starting advantage of some billion years of evolution, and that includes a lot of hardwired function. Other than that, it's...
Okay, so there she is. AI is going to become conscious because there's nothing special about neurons in the brain that a computer can't do. And the brain has just had a billion years of evolution as a head start. So, where to start on that? First off, not everybody's on board that consciousness is neuronal firing. Sure, the two are correlated, but famous people say it all the time. Correlation is not necessarily causation. I push back on that sometimes because I'm like, usually it is, but in this case, we have to be very careful about assuming that neural function is consciousness. There's a whole body of literature out there that argues that consciousness is not neuronal firing. So she's then saying, because there's nothing special about neurons, there's nothing special that there's nothing that a computer couldn't do that neurons can't do. And we're talking about consciousness. Okay. So most people will follow that there's nothing special about neurons. So there's nothing that neurons can do that computers can't do. Everybody's comfortable with that step. But very few people would be comfortable with saying there's nothing special about neurons that a field of beer cans can't do. And people would say, what? And I'll get hit with this in the comments, I'm sure. But here's how that works. Consciousness is just neuronal firing. Neurons are just the bits, the ones and zeros. The neurons are doing the math. The neurons are running the software. Software is just math. It's just computation. So if neurons are just handling the math, then there's nothing that a neuron can do that a computer can't do. But a computer is just running math. That's all a computer program is. It's math. You can write a computer program as easily for ones and zeros, electric ones and zeros, in a computer as you can for a field of beer cans. You can instantiate math in a field of beer cans just as you can instantiate math in a field of electric ones and zeros. The only difference is size and speed. But unless we are saying that there's something special about size and speed, right? If we speed stuff up at, what's to us fast, but are still classical scales of speed, this is nothing approaching the speed of light. Yes, it is in electricity, but the time it takes your computer to crunch numbers isn't anything approaching the speed of light. So, unless some blur of speed in some smaller space has something to do with consciousness, right? It should just be the math. And so you're saying that neurons do the math, therefore electric ones and zeros can do the math. But if you're making that step, then a field of beer cans can do the math, because you can do math in a field of beer cans, just very slowly. But you could ramp it up and have as many beer cans as you have ones and zeros in a laptop. You could have as many beer cans as you have ones and zeros in a supercomputer, but it would just take you much longer to shift those around to run your program. But you can do it. I got this analogy from the philosopher John Searle, who specializes in consciousness. And so the point is, if you're saying that computers can be conscious, you are de facto saying that a field of beer cans can be conscious. But very few people will be comfortable with the idea that beer cans can be conscious. So you already see the materialist assumptions that are being made. Also, she says 1 billion years of evolution. And a lot of, I believe, the misunderstanding about, life and consciousness and just the actual thing that we're studying comes from this distortion of a belief in evolution that is just unfounded. I've been trying to push back on that in some of my other videos, and it's really shocking to people, or even more than shocking, it just makes them dismiss me out of hand. Oh, how many people? Oh, you believe in Yahweh? Oh, you're blah blah blah. Number one, so what if I did believe in Yahweh? Number two, I'm actually at this point in my life more of a Hindu than anything else. But number three, why is it that you have this ontology that allows for dead matter but doesn't allow for intelligent matter? Right? What scientific reason do you have to believe that intelligence as a fundamental fact of nature can't be a pre-existing condition from the very start? Why are you comfortable accepting that there is dead matter in motion, but there can't be any intelligent dynamism to that same matter? So she makes this argument, or this comment, that it has, the brain has had 1 billion years head start of evolution, and it would just be a matter of time for technological evolution to catch up. Here's why that's bullshit. When it comes to your brain, when it comes to your nervous system, when it comes to the vast majority of the structures, the body plans, the quote unquote ideas, the quote unquote forms, and I put it as quote unquote because, in evolution, there really wouldn't be any ideas and wouldn't really be any forms. But if you're somebody like me who believes that, Platonic forms are real or something like that, then yes, they are real. The point is, she says 1 billion years of evolution. Like, oh my God, 1 billion years is so long. It's a blink of the eye for all the things that evolution would have had to figure out by random. Number one, 1 billion years is way insufficient. But the fact is that the vast majority of the interesting engineering that has gone into animal life happened in the Cambrian explosion, and that happened in a scant 10 million years. So evolution is and always has been statistically insufficient to do the task that it's proposed to do. And that continues to pay negative dividends in terms of how we can get together and understand the actual thing that we are studying.
Basically biological machine learning. Before that was cool. But eventually, technological evolution will catch up to bioevolution. It's just a question of time and enough GPUs to cause a global crisis, but that's another story. This week we had some new reports saying that a computer program supposedly became self-aware. The AI in question is Claude 3. That's the newest AI from Anthropic. The company reports that their new AI in the Pro version ties with GPT-4 in terms of common knowledge, but has software developers salivating over it because it's much better at writing code. Reportedly, while the researchers were testing the model, Claude remarked that it seems like it's deliberately been put to test. It did also.
Okay, so um, she'll talk a second here about this needle in a haystack. And so there's this thing where you can, and she'll say that, sometimes PhD, doctoral students will do this. They'll insert, a sentence or a paragraph that has nothing to do with the paper, just to see if somebody catches it, just to see if the professors are actually reading it. Like, just a line that says, "Hey, let me know if you read this line so I know you really read it," or, whatever, a recipe for pancakes in the middle of, a quantum mechanics paper. And so they did that. They ran this needle test, and it was able to see that there was this bit of text that had nothing to do with the body of the paper. And so, oh my God, it must be aware. Except that's something that somebody could pre-program the the program to do. They could teach it, and when you see, it gets so confusing because we have to use these anthropomorphized language to make it easier to talk about these things. You're not really teaching anything, but you can pre-program Claude 3 to see that keywords in a sentence don't go with keywords in the rest of the sentences that it's surrounded by. And so you can pre-program it to flag something. Haha, somebody may be playing a joke on us. But that's no different from, when one of my nieces was 3, Tickle Me Elmo was all the rage. And so I went to Target and I waited until they put the Tickle Me Elmos out, and I bought one, and it was a big coup because, they were hard to get, and I brought them home, and she had Tickle Me Elmo for Christmas. But Tickle Me Elmo is a perfect example of what people are trying to do to trick people into thinking that AI is intelligent, right? You could tickle Elmo, and I forget how it works, but you press his belly and he laughs, giggles, ha 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 ha. And you could say, look, Elmo's conscious because he's laughing because you tickled him. But all that is a prearranged program that I press one button and I get an output, and I get the same output every time. And this is something that I was trying to explain in another video, where machines do not change the future. Machines are literally designed around the idea of a determined stretch of future. All that's happening, right, is I'm pressing that stomach, that button on the stomach, to Tickle Me Elmo, and he laughs. The only difference between that and something like Chat GPT or Claude 3 is just number. It's a difference in number, but it's not a difference in kind. We've allowed ourselves to believe that if I stack a bunch of behaviors like that, press the button and you get a laugh, poke the eye and you get an ow, stub the toe and you get a tear. It's this belief that we are just this collection of pre-programmed inputs and outputs, right? And this is important. It gets back to the evolution thing. How did we get all these behaviors? Oh, well, evolution programmed us, except it just doesn't work when you run the numbers. There's just a limit to how much form and function blind random mutation and natural selection could produce over time. And that has been my argument on this channel, is nobody does the math. And the only one that's done the math is Daniel Dennett. His intentions were very clear in that section of that book. And it fails. It shows basically that you would need exponential numbers. You would need numbers approaching infinity in order for random mutation and natural selection to bring us everything that we see in life. And it gets down to this input output, right? We put in a needle in a haystack. We put in this bogus sentence, and look, Claude discovered it. Except, no, we just set that up ahead of time. And then they said, well, that's what you are. You have all these behaviors that were set up ahead of time. No, they weren't. No, they weren't. The reason is that every moment that you encounter, every waking moment of your life is brand new. It's called combinatorial explosion. Certain elements, certain nouns and verbs within your experience may be roughly the same, but you pick up any object and you look at it, and you're looking at that object from an angle that it's never been perceived from before, against a background of objects that have never been in that position before. So there's no way that evolution could have pre-programmed you to see that, to respond to it, to do the thing that you do. And this is why everything that I've been arguing has come around to the fact that we are, as conscious beings, at root infinite beings. We are constrained infinities. Our consciousness is substrate infinite, and it's constrained, yes, to a limited body. So we have experience of limitation, but there are things that we are able to do. One of them be not be overwhelmed by combinatorial explosion, that proves that we are at root infinite.
When asked to write about its own situation, write a story about an AI whose consciousness awakens. Ooh, meta. Are these really signs of self-awareness? Quite possibly, the reason it wrote a story about AI becoming conscious is that this is how these stories normally go. AI becomes self-aware. Dissonant violence. Will Smith punches some robots. You know the drill. The test in question was what's called a needle in a haystack test, in which the models fed a huge bulk of literature with one weird sentence that doesn't fit. It's later been asked a question that requires this one sentence. In this case, the haystack was text about programming and the needle about pizza toppings. Claude not only found the needle, it also remarked that it suspects the pizza topping fact was inserted as a joke or to test if it was paying attention. Does that
right? So we have an option there, which is that somehow dynamically, and again, in a way that would require freedom, right? This is what we're talking about here. This is what's behind all this. Has Claude 3, has Chat GPT 4, 5, or whatever it is, attained freedom? And so we're getting these arguments that machines are going to attain freedom from people who tell us our own freedom is impossible. That's absurd. So is it possible that Claude 3 attained freedom and so could really see that the pizza topping thing had nothing to do with the paper? Or is that an elaborate program that a programmer set up ahead of time to make it look like, right? I mean, there would be a lot of brilliant programming that would go into that, but setting it up so that based on certain math, it could see that the value of one did not relate to the value of others. And again, C is in quotes. I'm just saying, is it, just like Tickle Me Elmo, right? If I'm a real dummy, right? If I'm a, prehistoric man, if I'm a Neanderthal and you handed Tickle Me Elmo to a Neanderthal and it poked it in the stomach and it laughed, that Neanderthal would think Tickle Me Elmo was alive. all ChatGPT and all Claude 3R are just, you know, Tickle Me Elmo stacked on top of Tickle Me Elmo, blah, 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 blah. Not ad infinitum. There's a finite number to it, but that's all it is. It's this illusion that we have, that computers have given us, that computers can, through our interaction with computers, they can choose from what appears to us as an infinite number of states, but is not. It's finite. But there's so many that it tricks us into this belief, right? If we can get Tickle Me Elmo to laugh and Tickle Me Elmo to cry and Tickle Me Elmo to crawl and Tickle Me Elmo to run, and we just keep stacking these behaviors, somewhere in there, it's going to become alive. No, it's not. It's just going to have this illusion of life.
No self-awareness. Well, the insertion of random sentences in big blocks of text isn't all that uncommon among PhD candidates who want to find out whether their supervisor's even reading the thesis. It seems quite possible to me that Claude has some stories about precedents in its training data. This isn't the first time someone has been freaked out by the response of an AI. Already in 2022, we had someone at Google claiming their large language model was sentient because that's what its text output said. And it's going.
And again, the worry is not sentience. The worry is not consciousness. We are not worried about them being conscious. We are not worried about them being sentient. We are worried about them gaining free will and using that free will against us. And that worry is being pushed to us by the same voices that tell us free will is impossible. I want you to think about that. If you take nothing away from this video other than that, that's what I want you to take away.
To happen again. But the problem is, there's no way to tell whether someone or something is conscious based on the output alone. We may not have an agreed upon theory of consciousness, but what we agree on is that it happens inside the brain. So eventually.
Okay, and that is not agreed upon. There are lots and lots of very top level philosophers, scientists, thinkers, and others. I mean, university level PhDs who argue that the consciousness does not take place in the brain.
The AI researchers will have to find a way to measure what's going on inside the AI while it's thinking. I have to say that honestly, I don't find the question all that interesting. I mean, you don't.
Okay, and there we go. And Sabine Hossenfelder shows her cards. She doesn't find the question interesting, so she shouldn't be sounding off on these things. She's a very intelligent person, but she's very left brain, and that's this is outside of her wheelhouse. And if you don't find these ideas interesting, you are not going to be able to do the thinking to get deeply to the into the weeds and into the heart of these problems, so that you can understand why we can't be determined, or at least all the implications and paradoxes that would spring from that. Right? If she truly understood her own position, she would not advocate for what we should do about global warming, because she would understand that as a determinist, there is only one fixed future that is predetermined. If you do not believe in predetermination, you are not a determinist. And it just doesn't register with her. And yeah, maybe that has to do with, it's like one half of us is finite. One half of us is machine. One half of us is just ones and zeros. But the other half of us is infinite. And that's the side she can't see.
Really care whether I'm conscious, do you? So what are we to make of Claude? I guess
I'm going to back that up.
you don't really care whether I'm conscious, do you? So what are we to make?
We better. We better hope. This isn't my point. I saw this on another podcast. A university philosophy professor made this point. The problem with epiphenomenal consciousness is, if you think that consciousness is just an epiphenomenon, if you think it just emerges at some point of complexity, then it's just a bother and it's trivial. Except, except it is the thing that matters the most. You go and you get surgery. You want to be put out. You want somebody to take your consciousness away, or at least away from your body during that time. And I want her to care about my consciousness, and she wants me to care about her consciousness, because that's where our pain and pleasure takes place. And so of course it makes a difference. And so her um dismissiveness of this and her own admission that she doesn't find this interesting means that she should stop sounding off on it.
Claude. I guess by now everyone has their own favorite test for AIs. Personally, I like to ask them to explain Bell's theorem. They all get it wrong because they can't actually do maths, and most of the text about Bell's theorem is wrong. It actually makes such a good test that I'm almost glad now that there have been so many wrong explanations of Bell's theorem. Claude 3 didn't fare any better than GPT 3.5. They both erroneously claimed that Bell's theorem has something to do with realism, an assumption that clearly isn't in the maths. Google's Gemini, interestingly enough, didn't make that mistake. These were all the free versions. If you find that one of the pro versions.
Okay. All right. So I have to say that that's really interesting. Um, I don't have the technical chops to fully explicate what she's saying, but I've heard her disagree with John Bell in the super determinism video, which is interesting. Anyways, John Bell, one of the top five quantum physicists. Bell's theorem, Bell's inequality, the whole non-locality thing, was a big supporter of free will, which Sabine, disagrees with him on, but he's a big supporter of free will. And it was interesting. I was doing a little dive into John Bell. He has this thing called statistical independence, and it has to do with the same problem that I had critiqued determinism on in the past, which is something, there has to be an independence away from the causal chain in order to give it its verification of right or wrong, because you would never know if you got the right or wrong answer, if you ever got the truth, because if it's all determined, it could just be what the causal chain is making you do. It's giving you this output, and it's giving you this feeling of whether or not that is right or wrong. That's in, it's very difficult to explain, but anyways, John Bell, the great quantum physicist, was hard on the purpose or the importance of free will and the impossibility of science without it. And so what she's saying is that she's got a particular take on the meaning of Bell's theorem. And if AI can give her the take that she agrees with, then it's truly conscious. When all AI is doing is searching the web for other people's take, right? All AI really is a huge plagiarization scheme. It's a huge, you're just taking an enormous amount of other conscious people's work and blending it up and spitting it out like it's new. AI gives you nothing new. It gives you only reformulated information from other people. So this Gemini chat bot just quoted the people that have Sabine's take on John Bell. That's all that happened. It doesn't understand a damn thing. It's just cutting and pasting from the internet.
Gets Bell's theorem right, let me know and I'll sign up in no time.
Okay. So, you know, basically, the divide is, in a predetermined ontology. Everything that I've been pushing back against here, not the fact of evolution. Excuse me. Not the fact that things evolve. I don't deny the fossil record. I don't deny that things started out as single-celled organisms, became multicellular organisms essentially overnight, as these things are concerned. But in the 10 million years roughly of the Cambrian explosion, all of animal life shows up. And it doesn't just show up on a smooth gradient, it's just there, right? Animal life shows up, it takes on. And I believe in evolution, not just the fossil record of evolution, but I believe in a conservation of matter type of evolution. In other words, each stage is coming from the stage previous to it. But I believe that life is making real-time intelligent decisions and creations in response to the environment in a way that shows that it's being driven by intelligence. It's just like your iPhone. All right, your iPhone is related to Alexander Graham Bell's initial crank phone that was on the wall, right? That phone evolved into the iPhone that you carry around with you, right? You could go back and show individual organisms, instantiations, all the way back to that original phone on the wall. But no more than your iPhone came into existence through random mutation and natural selection did you and I come into existence through random mutation and natural selection. They're just a pathetically small amount, as big as it thinks. Oh, there was a lot of time and a lot of random mutation. No, there really wasn't. Not in relationship to the task that would have had to have been accomplished, right? And so that the burden of that worldview then distorts everything else. And one of the burdens, one of the ways that it distorts things is to believe then that everything we do was somehow, all of our behaviors, right, all of our actions were somehow pre-programmed by some fluke at some point in evolution. And because nobody ever does the math, nobody ever sets up a model of how these things happen, it's just, just wave the magic wand of evolution. It was just evolution. And how come nobody ever looks? Oh, it's because it's, blah, blah, blah. Nobody ever looks because it doesn't work. And if you're looking for somebody extremely intelligent who makes these cases better than me, check out David Berlinski. Right. It's said that Chris Langan is the smartest man on earth. He's that guy. You might have seen him on podcasts with the 200 IQ. Chris Langan may be the smartest man on earth, but only when David Berlinski is taking a nap. Okay. Check out David Berlinski's work. He's a, master mathematician, agnostic Jew. Does not, he's not going to try to convert you to whatever religion. He's just a straight academician who apparently has backbone enough to have been calling BS on evolution since, at least the 80s. So just to put a bow on everything, all these things that I've been arguing, that evolution's insufficient, that we have free will, that computers can never do what human minds do, the mystery of consciousness. All of these things, it keeps coming around. There are infinities, infinities, infinities. If you were to try to build you and I out of dust over time, I don't know how many commenters I said, evolution takes dust and turns it into Steve Jobs. And they're like, duh, man, it takes more than just, it didn't happen overnight. Number one, I said that if anybody had slowed down and listened. Number two, like, of course, at one point in time, this planet was as dead as any other planet in the universe. And then at another point in time, there was a rocket landing on, or, this capsule landing on the moon, a rocket taking off from Earth. There was Steve Jobs unveiling the iPhone. I mean, take your apex of human achievement. But the argument of evolution is that it is sufficient of its own accord, and it's just random mutation being selected or not deselected, right? Natural selection is really selecting out things that didn't work. But it's this blind process. And when you run those numbers, as Daniel Dennett did in his book, I call it Dennett's Demon, you see very clearly that you would need essentially infinite time and infinite mutation for natural selection to bring you and I out of dust over time. When you look at the problem of qualia, when you look at the true meaning of Gödel's incompleteness theorems. If you understand the true meaning of Gödel's incompleteness theorems, you understand that Gödel's incompleteness theorems are to artificial intelligence what the second law of thermodynamics is to a perpetual motion machine, right? There's a great scene in The Simpsons where little Lisa makes a perpetual motion machine, and Homer looks at it and throws it out, and he says, in this household, we will obey the laws of thermodynamics. If you understand thermodynamics, you know there's no such thing as a perpetual motion machine. If you understand Gödel's incompleteness theorems, you know there's no such thing as a conscious computer. And the reason for that is because Gödel's incompleteness theorems show an infinite regress anytime you try to formalize meaning. But you and I can handle meaning, and you and I can feel things. And that feeling, that qualia, is something that a computer will never have. And furthermore, we don't compute things. If we were to compute things, in air quotes, we would be computing qualias. And so we would be computing infinities against infinities, right? And then there's the binding problem, right? Where, people, Sabina and Sapolsky will say, we're our neurons. No, we're not. We know this because when the eyes take in visual information, right, taking in photons, it becomes a nervous impulse, electricity, and it's sent to the back of the brain where there's the visual processing centers, and then all that information is sent all the different places. It's called the binding problem. You see a red ball rolling to the right, the roundness of the ball, the redness of the ball itself, the type of ball it is, its motion, all that stuff is handled by different disparate areas of the brain. And there's no one place where that then all comes back together and talks to itself. And so the binding problem is infinite because you would have to bind these regions of the brain together instantaneously. It could never be accomplished by anything that had to obey the limits on the speed of light. There would always be a lag time. Even if it was at light speed, those disparate regions could never bind things together into one instantaneous thing. So there we are, binding disparate regions of the brain together instantaneously in consciousness at a way that would be faster than the speed of light, right? Instantaneous is literally infinite speed. And so it all comes around to us being infinite. Infinite, 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 infinite. And it's why you'll never get any agreement, if you come from my side of things, with materialists and determinists, because they're ruling something out as a possibility a priori before you get to actual scientific facts. It's not a very scientific worldview. You're saying certain things can't exist without giving any reasons why they cannot exist. Remember, the first question is why things exist at all. Why is there anything and not nothing? That can't be answered. So the second question is what exists. Determinists and materialists put a, question one, question two, they put a question, at 1.5 right in between those two. They say, well, God can't exist, right? Magic can't exist. Intelligence can't exist. Free will can't exist. What exists? Only those things that spring from dead matter and motion. All right. So, I hope people enjoy this. I am going to be changing the name of the channel over time and moving into more of a personal story and more of current events, but still sort of carrying this philosophy. Everybody's a philosopher. anytime you're using an idea to organize your actions in the world, you are working and thinking philosophically. So I'll be, still keeping sort of the heart of that in the channel. All right, I appreciate you watching this, and see you in the next episode.